Last month, I got a job in a mini-mart to pay for college since my savings weren't quite enough. I was only able to take night shifts since I spend most of the day at school and at home studying. When you're on the night shift, you're all alone. But it's not too hard, since barely anyone comes in during the evenings. There's an office where employees can hang out when there's nothing to do. There, you can monitor the security cameras and go over what needs to be done. The security cameras even have built-in motion detectors that will alert you if a movement is detected. I spend most of my time there with snacks, playing on my phone, while I wait for customers to come in. The other employees describe it as getting paid for being alone in a store, with the occasional break to help the handful of customers that come in during the night. On my first shift, I immediately noticed something out of the ordinary was going on. The motion detectors would go off when the store was empty and the cameras didn't show anything. Then I began hearing faint voices and footsteps from within the store. The voices would be indistinct but spoken in the same tone of voice that people usually speak in when they're chatting with someone they haven't met in a long time. Even customers would sometimes hear this and think it was me saying something when I really hadn't. I usually go to check but find nothing. The store is empty. Later, when I was refilling the soda cooler, I started seeing people walk past me in the reflection of the glass door, but no one was there. This happened several times, and I never saw anyone near me. The coolers would also sometimes open and slam quietly shut at random times. Do you know that feeling you get when you're in a crowded room? That minor claustrophobic sense, and that feeling like people are looking at you? That's how I always feel when I'm closing up the store and cleaning up. It could be paranoia, and I'm just imagining it, but my past experiences lead me to believe it is not. I've never had the nerve to mention this to my boss, out of fear of getting labeled crazy and possibly getting fired for being unfit. But I'm dead certain there is something going on there. I don't intend to quit anytime soon, since I don't feel like I'm in any danger, and I need the money, but this scares me a lot. Every night seems to have more going on than the last, and I've began writing down in my phone what I witness. I'm not aware that anyone has ever died in the store, but the store has been open since the 1920s, and anything could have happened. I've wanted to research it, but it's changed names and owners several times, which makes it hard to do so. I'm a female in her late 20s, single and self-employed. My life is very normal, a nice way of describing a boring life, and honestly, I enjoy living this laid-back style of life. Or maybe I should say that in the past tense now. My job/business revolves around managing a dozen websites that I own. 3 of them I built when I was only 18 years old. Thanks to my digital properties, I don't need a job, and I have a very flexible schedule throughout the year. When I say flexible, I don't mean that I work less hours than the average person. Believe me, I work much longer hours than most, but I am able to manage those hours however I please. I have a younger brother who got married too young. He was only 20 when he got his girlfriend pregnant. They got married, but then she ran off after giving birth and left her baby in the sole care of my brother. I do give him credit for working long hours to provide for his son, but because he's a single father who earns less than the median average income, me and my mom have to pitch in with many hours of babysitting. Lately though, it's become challenging to take care of him due to some discoveries I've made while babysitting him. The issue was first brought up by my mom, and to be frank, I had dismissed it initially as her paranoia, but now I'm beginning to realize I was very wrong. The issues with little Jimmy began surfacing about a month ago. I was making his lunch when I hear him laugh so happily and loudly that I had to see for myself what was making him laugh like that. The kitchen blocks half the view of the living room, so I walked a few steps to my right and peeked in. The TV was still on, but Jimmy wasn't watching it. Instead, he just looked at an empty space and continued to laugh. I found it odd, but children his age, he's 4 by the way, they can be rather unpredictable when it comes to humor, so I chalked it up to another episode of laughing out loud for nothing. For the next 2 weeks, I see the same thing happen quite a few times. The thing that made me feel uneasy though was the fact that he would never do it while I'm physically next to him. It would always happen when I'm in the bathroom, when I'm cooking, or doing any other activity that would put me in a different space from him. At this point, I suspected an imaginary friend more than anything, but I was still concerned because I wasn't well educated when it comes to children and their imaginary friends. It turns out though, it's perfectly normal for children to have imaginary friends, and almost all of them grow out of it as they age. Fast forward a week, so that's a week ago from today. I'm watching TV, and Jimmy's playing with his car parking lot / slide toy made out of wood. I specifically bought him that, so he has as little contact with plastic as possible at a young age. It's heavy and the base is very wide, so there's no way for him to tip it over with his strength or weight for that matter. All of a sudden, I'm startled by a loud thud, so the first thing I do is check on Jimmy to make sure he isn't hurt. First, I'm relieved to find him unharmed, but he's giggling like he just saw an elephant fart. The second thing I notice is the tipped over parking lot toy. I place it back up, and I have to put some back into it because of how heavy it is. It's probably a no biggie for a grown man, but for a 5'3", 112-pound female, it takes a little more effort. Once the toy's upright, I shake it, gently kick it, and push it with quite some force to try to see if I can tip it over. I was thinking I would stash it in the basement if it posed any danger to little Jimmy. It wasn't necessary. It wouldn't tip over unless I grabbed it from the top and forcefully pushed it to one side. I tried asking Jimmy how the toy fell, but he would give me the obvious answer of a 4-year-old. He'd just laugh. I was troubled, but there was nothing more that I could do to get more answers from a little baby. An hour later, Jimmy started clinging, and I knew he was sleepy. I put him to sleep in my arms, then laid him in his crib upstairs. Finally, freedom to get some work done. I opened my laptop and began reading and responding to emails from business associates. Not even half an hour had passed when I hear something heavy fall, and Jimmy started crying. I could hear him in the baby monitor and all the way from upstairs as well. I rushed upstairs, and I'm so panicked at this point that I lose my footing a few times, and I bang my knees on the stairs. It hurts like crazy, but I ignore the pain and run into Jimmy's room. To my dismay, the big, and not to mention heavy, wooden armoire had fallen on Jimmy's crib, but thank God, the top frame had held it from crushing Jimmy. I don't know where I got the strength, but I pushed the armoire back up to the wall and held Jimmy in my arms. I tried to calm him down, but he kept pointing towards the wall, and he wouldn't stop crying. I looked intently towards the direction he's pointing at, but I saw nothing but the wall. I walked out of the room and downstairs. I opened the kitchen slide door and walked out to the backyard to give Jimmy some fresh air and some sunlight to help with his nerves. He soon fell asleep in my arms, and I didn't let him go until my mom had arrived after I had called her. When she arrived, she found us in the backyard. She came through the side walkway of the house because I refused to go back in the house. I explained to her what happened, and she didn't need any convincing to believe what I was telling her. She already knew. I got angry at whatever thing or being was harassing my nephew. I went back inside the house and screamed from the top of my lungs, "Leave my nephew alone, you despicable shit. Why don't you mess with me and see if you can hurt me?" I heard nothing back. I could only hear my heavy breathing and the refrigerator running. Mom took Jimmy to her house, and I was left in my house alone. Ever since the day I dared the being to hurt me, I haven't slept well. Not one day. I put my head down on the pillow, and I can hear strange voices. Voices that make all the hair on your back stand and make you want to run out of your own house. I do everything I can to disregard the voices. Then comes the sound of footsteps downstairs, and on the stairs leading to my bedroom on the second floor. The harassing is progressively getting worse every night, and I fear that it can only get worse. On the upside, Jamie seems to be doing wonderfully, and my mom couldn't be happier. If I were given the choice again, there's no doubt in my mind that I'd take this burden off of my little nephew. But this thing's stuck with me now, and I don't know what to do. I can't go to the police, for obvious reasons. I spoke to the priest at my church, and he suggested I see a professional about it. Trust me, it's not like in the movies. Priests don't come to your house to bless the house or to perform an exorcism of sort. I spoke to some paranormal experts, and they all sound like creeps hoping to take advantage of helpless women, or some crooks seeking easy money opportunities. I'm doing my best to stay brave, but I know there will come a point when I'll fall apart, and there's nothing I can do to stop that from happening. I research the paranormal every day. I read and watch scary stories in hopes to find someone else who had a similar experience, but they're all fake. I know this from the answers I get when I ask them specific questions about the events. People in my situation really seem like one in a million. If anything happens to me, you know my full name, and you have a rough idea of where I live. I'll keep in touch and update you on my daily struggle time to time. I hope you do believe that I'm sane. That way, if I lose this fight, I'll at least have one person other than my mom who will know I didn't drive myself crazy. I wasn't crazy. I was driven into madness.
I graduated from college 2 years ago and got a job at a marketing agency after 3 months of search. I was a low-level employee in charge of data entry, preliminary research, and everything else the higher-ups did not want to bother with. 1 year into the job, it soon became a reality that I was never going to climb the ladder up the ranks. I did really well in school, but out in the real world, competing against the finest, my talent level was less than impressive. I was living with a friend for a year until his girlfriend wanted to move in, and I was basically kicked out of the apartment. I ended up renting a cheap apartment in a sketchy neighborhood because roommates come and go, and you have to be able to pay the rent in the event that one bolts on you abruptly. The friend who kicked me out introduced me to a co-worker of his, and seeing as how his life was no better than mine, we thought we'd make good roomies. Let's say that his name was Joe before we proceed with the story. So anyways, Joe had his room and I had mine. He had a messed up work schedule because he wasn't a full-time employee and was more like a filler. We weren't best of friends, but we sometimes hung out together, and I guess overall we were friendly. But that was the extent of our relationship. I was at work one day and my phone kept vibrating in my pocket, but I couldn't answer phone calls or text in the office because of the company policy. Technically, we can make personal phone calls using the company landline, but no one does that because every call is logged and recorded. So the phone continues to go off, and after 10 minutes or so, I even turned off the vibrate function. Come lunch break, I checked my phone and I had exactly 12 missed calls and 22 text messages from Joe. This is the transcript of the messages I received that day, but I'm writing them from my memory and not reading them off my phone. There's a reason for that, and I'll explain after the transcript. Hey man, open the door. It's not even funny. Why aren't you at work? I'll wait 2 more minutes and I'm breaking this door down. The only name on the lease is yours. You'll have to pay for the door. Fuck man, I need to get ready for work. What the fuck? What's with the heat? Are you kidding me? Turn down the heat and open the fucking door. Shit man, I don't know what you're doing, but I can't reach anyone but you. It's too fucking hot. You're gonna kill me. I'm sorry man, I don't know what I did to you, but I apologize for everything. Please, just open the door. Is this really you? The window won't budge, and I can't even break it. My feet are literally cooking on the floor. Please, man, please open the door. I'll do anything you want. This can't be you unless you're the devil. The sun disappeared, and the room is completely dark. My only light source is the phone. You have to come and get me. I can't reach anyone. I send messages to anyone else, and the phone spits out network error. There's something in the room. It's saying something. Please, come and get me. I'm so scared. It just touched me, and his skin feels like scale, a scorching hot scale. I can smell my own flesh cooking. That's all I remember of his messages. Later that day, the cops took me in for questioning because 1, I was his roommate, and 2, the text messages. My phone number was locked. The phone was taken by the cops as evidence, and I was cleared of all charges after my boss told the cops I was at work all day, for the exception of the 45 minutes of lunch break. Fortunately, I had the lunch break alibi as well, thanks to the security camera in the parking lot of the restaurant I always eat at. I was not allowed into my apartment that day. Not that I wanted in so badly, but I had all my stuff there, and I at least wanted to get some clothes. The apartment was cleared after a week, but there was no way I was spending another night there. I took all my stuff and left. I made a deal with the landlord to pay for 2 months of rent in exchange for voiding the lease without penalty. I had no idea what happened to Joe in that apartment. The cops wouldn't tell me anything. Even though the case was closed, I still wanted to know what had happened to Joe. About a month later, I paid a visit to the detective who questioned me initially, and I told him I had the right to know what went on in that apartment. He told me he couldn't tell me much because he was under gag order, but he did tell me a couple of things before he told me to just move on with my life. He told me that Joe died from necrotizing fasciitis. In layman's terms, it's a bacterial infection that in some cases can rapidly destroy the skin of the infectee. I later learned that it's generally known as flesh-eating bug, and some medical professionals actually think it's worse than dying of Ebola. As far as the text messages go, the detective was just as clueless as I was, and that's all he told me. I'm still puzzled why he was able to reach me and me only. And what did he mean when he said something was in the room? He said it touched him, that it spoke to him. Maybe it's better that I don't know. And that is it for this video. I would first like to thank Sino Studios for this collaboration. We had a few mix-ups during the process of getting this collab ready, and normally speaking, you see the real person behind the initial politeness when things go wrong. It wasn't a big deal, but nonetheless, we were able to talk things out and come to an understanding. In the end, it turned out to be a really good experience working with him, and I look forward to more collaborations with him in the future. I'll leave the link to his channel in the video description, so go check out his contents, and also don't forget to check out the collab video I did for his channel. Lastly, a big shout out goes to Luke for submitting the spooky and of course tragic story of his roommate. I hope all is well for you, brother, so take good care of yourself and best of luck going forward. Thanks everyone for watching, and as always, stay safe.